Okay, you're back with us. We're still discussing the BBL. Section 5, Human Rights and Humanitarian Protection and Promotion. The Bangsamoro government may organize its own bodies for human rights. What will happen to our
Commission on Human Rights?
Commission on Human Rights?
It will no longer be a
They will not be covered
in with a nationwide scope. As I was saying, Eric, no, they have the power to amend laws. Like for example, the Bangsamoro government shall have the power to declare nature reserves and aquatic parks, forests, watershed reservations, and other protected areas in the Bangsamoro, amending for this purpose the following laws, among others, Republic Act number 7586, Presidential Decree number 705. So they will have the power to amend our national laws.
Exactly.
They can encroach on our domain, but we cannot encroach on their domain.
And then they have here also, number 7, auditing. The Bangsamoro auditing body shall have auditing responsibility over public funds utilized by the Bangsamoro. Of course, they're saying without prejudice to the power authority of the National Commission on Audit. But why the redundancy? Why not let COA do it?
Correct. That's the big question. Why not allow the Commission on Audit to do it?
They will also have develop and administer a professional civil service corps.
Not only that, they will have their own president. Do you know that?
They will have even a Bangsamoro civil service.
And they will have their own president, the so-called wali.
Yes, in short, for ceremonial purposes.
Yes, when you have a symbolic head of state, that means you are an independent country.
Question, why can't the president be
the head of state?
The head of state for the Bangsamoro? Why do you need a wali?
Yes. So it's actually an independent country because even the independent countries of the British Dominion, they have the Queen of England as their symbolic head of state.
Yes,
but in this case, it's not even the president of the Philippines. So
it's the wali.
It's the wali.
Yes.
So you are creating an entirely new country.
And by the way, under the Tausugs do not find the concept of wali as alien to them.
Yes.
It has something to do with marriages, nothing to do with leadership in government. Okay, I am really wondering what this intergovernmental relations mechanism is. There is going to be put up an intergovernmental relations mechanism. What do you mean by intergovernmental? So the central government vis-a-vis the Bangsamoro government?
It sounds like two countries, two independent countries, intergovernmental.
Why not call it Bangsamoro local government? Why is it?
And when you say inter, it's between two independent countries. Otherwise, it's called intra, within. Intra and inter are very different.
Okay, I'm going through all this, no? The exclusive powers. They will have exclusive powers in terms of labor and employment and occupation. They are able to put up economic zones and industrial centers as well. Yes. What will happen to our PESA?
And that's also the problem. Who will regulate the foreign countries that will enter there?
Free ports. The Bangsamoro government may establish free ports in the Bangsamoro. And then the Bangsamoro government shall cooperate with the central government. What do you mean by cooperate? Are they at parity? I mean, I'm asking you this, Ferdy. For example, number 14, what does this mean, Ferdy? The Bangsamoro government shall legislate, not pass ordinances, and implement the creation of its own GOCCs in the pursuit of the common good.
Encroaching on the powers of Congress.
They can create their own GOCCs.
But the problem is, they will already have their own Congress or Parliament, and yet, these areas will still have their representatives in the House of Representatives.
Yes.
And they are also entitled to put up their senators for campaigning and election.
The Bangsamoro government shall have authority to regulate power generation, transmission, and distribution operating exclusively in the Bangsamoro, not connected to the national transmission grid. The central government, the Bangsamoro, shall cooperate and coordinate through intergovernmental relations.
That's the problem, no? When you say the national patrimony, it includes the uranium in Mindanao.
Okay.
And the vast petroleum resources, because the petroleum resources in Sabah are now fast disappearing. The Malaysians want another source of oil and natural gas. Now, this oil and natural gas in Sabah belongs to the Filipino people, but the Malaysians stole it from us. Now, do you mean to say that the Filipino people will again not be able to partake of the oil, natural gas, and uranium in Mindanao, and then they will convert it into electricity, and it will not be connected to the national grid? Which grid will they connect to? The Malaysian grid?
And then here, on section 24, libraries, museums, historical, cultural, archaeological sites. The Bangsamoro government shall have the power to establish its own libraries, museums, and declare historical and cultural sites. The central government shall transfer the management of such sites currently under jurisdiction of the National Museum, National Historical Commission, and other agencies of the central government to the Bangsamoro government.
So we will be taking away a big chunk of our history as well, not only our territory, but our history and culture, no longer part of the Philippines, but exclusively to them.
Here, ancestral domain and natural resources as part of their exclusive powers.
Yes.
How come Malaysia is not part of the ancestral domain?
And another...
I mean, I'm talking about Sabah particularly.
Another question is, they are still Filipino citizens.
Okay.
So they can go to Ilocos Norte, they can go to Cagayan Valley to partake of the ancestral domain of the Ilocanos.
Yes.
But we, as Filipino citizens, can no longer go there. We will not have any preferential treatment. So somehow it violates the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution.
I'm worried about this term, about this phrase, Ferdy, and then you interpret it. The Bangsamoro Parliament shall create an appropriate office or ministry for the indigenous peoples, which shall be part of the Bangsamoro Cabinet to develop and implement the Bangsamoro programs for the indigenous peoples in accordance with a law passed by Parliament. So, the indigenous peoples will be second-class citizens to the to the Bangsamoro.
They will be under the mercy of the Bangsamoro.
Yes.
When in fact they are totally 100% different from the Bangsamoro.
Yes.
When it comes to the dialect being spoken, when it comes to the
culture,
the
traditions,
religion.
yeah.
So
and they're being integrated, assimilated into the Bangsamoro.
And they are being abandoned by the national government to a new entity called the Bangsamoro.
Okay. Here, cadastral and land survey. The Bangsamoro government shall have the authority to conduct cadastral surveys, lot surveys, isolated and special surveys in the Bangsamoro. Expropriation and eminent domain.
That's the problem. No? They can expropriate the properties of the indigenous peoples. We have a law regarding the indigenous peoples. They have their ancestral domain. So this ancestral domain of the indigenous peoples can be taken over by the Bangsamoro entity.
Okay. Now, I'm just reading through this, no? Section 57. The Bangsamoro Parliament may create, divide, merge, abolish, or substantially alter boundaries of provinces, cities, municipalities, or barangays in accordance with a law enacted by the Bangsamoro Parliament.
So that's practically allowing gerrymandering on a large scale without the consent of the entire Filipino people.
Okay. Other exclusive powers. Okay, we're going to go, we'll try to go through this as quickly as possible, no? To regulate and exercise authority over foreign investments within its jurisdiction. Of course, the only time the central government may intervene is such matters as national security, as you mentioned a while ago.
That's the problem, no? What if the lands there are suddenly owned by the Malaysians, for example, and converted into palm tree plantations? So what will happen to the common Filipino Muslims? Will they be able to benefit from the riches of the land? Like for example, in Timor-Leste, what happened to Timor-Leste? The people in Timor-Leste were fooled into believing that they will get rich if they declare independence from Indonesia. But what happened? Timor-Leste became independent, but the people are pitiful. They are very poor, and now the common Timor-Leste people want to go back to become Indonesian citizens, but they can no longer do that.
Section C, Ferdy, you interpret this. To temporarily take over or direct operation of any privately owned public utility or business affected with public interest in times of state calamity declared by the Chief Minister, when the public interest so requires and under such reasonable terms and safeguards as may be prescribed by Parliament.
Actually, that is lifted from the Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines on the article regarding the national economy and patrimony. So instead of the Republic of the Philippines having that power, they will now have that power within their territory.
To temporarily take over.
Yes.
Private properties. And oh my goodness. Okay. What else? Here, to conduct inquiries or public consultations in aid of legislation accordance with its rules. In accordance therewith, it shall have the power to issue subpoena or subpoena juris tecum to compel the attendance of witnesses and other production of papers, documents, or things by witnesses or persons under investigation of the Parliament.
So, for example, you are a Filipino, not a Bangsamoro, living in Ilocos Norte, and you are issued a subpoena, duces tecum and ad testificandum. So, you will have to go bring your documents and yourself to the Bangsamoro territory, otherwise you might be cited in contempt.
It shall have the right to cite witnesses or persons under investigation for contempt, for refusal to testify before any of its committees, or to produce papers, documents, or things required by the Parliament of any of its committees.
So, that's a problem, no? They have the power outside of their territory, but the Republic of the Philippines do not have the power within that Bangsamoro entity territory.
And here's another, number 3, to enact a law. I am really very, how would I call it, uneasy about the term to enact a law. Why not an ordinance? That would allow the Chief Minister, Speaker of the Parliament, and the Presiding Justice of the Bangsamoro Sharia High Court to augment any item of the Bangsamoro General Appropriations Law for the respective offices.
The use of the word law connotes that it is no longer a territory of the Philippines. Because if you are a territory of the Philippines, the appropriate word to use is ordinance.
Ordinance.
So that means you are no longer a part of the Philippines. You will have your own law.
Yes. Within the competencies of the Bangsamoro government, again, the word, to enact a law that shall regulate the grant of franchises and concessions and empower the Chief Minister to grant leases, permits, and licenses over agricultural lands and for forest management.
That is, again, a surrender of the exclusive power of the Congress of the Filipino people to a new Congress of a so-called Bangsamoro people.
And here is the frightening part. To establish and operate pioneering public utilities in the interest of regional welfare and security. Upon payment of just compensation, it may cause the transfer of the ownership of such utilities to cooperatives or other collective organizations.
So
they will be the one to determine this.
So the Lopezes and the Alcantara should take note of that.
Here is another one, letter J. To supervise and regulate private schools in the Bangsamoro. And to allow the participation, or this is already the representation.
So the DepEd and the CHED will no longer have jurisdiction over there.
Okay.
So it's an entirely new country for all intents and purposes.
The state universities and colleges within the Bangsamoro shall be considered part of the Bangsamoro educational system. Okay, this notwithstanding, of course, the state universities shall enjoy academic freedom, fiscal autonomy, and shall continue to be governed by the respective charters.
That's the problem, no? Because we were colonized by the Americans, not only with guns, but also by brainwashing us through education. So education is an important tool. If we want to remain a strong country, there must be a control of the education of the entire Filipino people by the national government, not by a new entity called Bangsamoro.
Okay, we have a few seconds. We're going to pause for a few reminders. And then Section 7 talks, for good governance, the Bangsamoro Parliament may enact a local government code when Republica returns.